The first scream came through the comm's mid-drop, just as the drop ship punched through the upper atmosphere of Epsilon Chi Earth Roman 4. The pilot didn't flinch, but the squad leader's hand tightened around the overhead rail. "Confirm casualty," she snapped into her mic. "Unit F9, Corporal Serrex, abdominal breach bleeding out," came the reply. The voice belonged to Medic Vol, one of the Lomari field techs embedded with the joint unit. His tone was clipped, but his breathing was erratic, too fast for a species that typically processed panic in silence. Sergeant Lyra clenched her jaw. "Stabilize him, we land in 90 seconds. "Negative, wound is terminal," Vol said immediately. "Do what you can." "I have. His vitals are collapsing." "He will not survive the descent." Jace Garner sat strapped in across from the med bay hatch, helmet resting between his boots. He looked up from his lap. "What kind of wound?" No reply. Jace stood. "I'm going in." "Garner, sit your ass down," Lyra barked. He was already unstrapping. "If he's bleeding out, someone needs to clamp it. Vol doesn't know human anatomy." "I am certified," Vol interjected. Jace shoved the hatch open. "You passed a 2-week xenomed course." "That doesn't make you a trauma surgeon." Inside the med bay, Serrex lay flat on his back, armored chest plates split open and discarded on the floor. His fatigues were soaked in blood, the dark red pooling beneath him. His lips were blue. Jace dropped to his knees beside the table. "What the hell did you do?" Vol pulled back, surgical tools hovering midair from his harness. "He was impaled by shrapnel, liver and intestine damage. I closed the external wound, but he is entering terminal hypotension. His system is failing." "He's in shock," Jace said. "You didn't even try to warm him up." "There is no point, he's alive." "Not for long," Vol replied. Jace grabbed a thermal blanket from the wall, wrapped it around Serrex's torso, then looked around. "Where's the pressure infuser?" "The what?" Jace didn't answer. He found it himself, jammed a saline pack into the chamber and hooked it to Serrex's arm. The soldier groaned faintly. "See that?" Jace looked up. "That's not dead. He will not make it to base camp." "Well, let's find out." The ship lurched as it hit the upper canopy. Jace braced himself against the cabinet. The green light above the door flickered, then turned red. "Touchdown imminent." Lyra's voice came back over the speaker. "Garner, if you're in there, we're 30 seconds out. Brace for hard landing." "Copy." Vol stepped back. "You are delaying the inevitable." Jace didn't answer. He kept his hand on Serrex's pulse. Weak but steady. The drop ship slammed into the ground, skidding on the reinforced landing pads. The impact knocked Jace backwards into the bulkhead. The med bay lights flickered, but Serrex didn't move. 10 minutes later, the hatch hissed open, and a human recovery team rushed in to carry Serrex to triage. 3 hours later, Jace stood outside the medical tent, his arms crossed. He was still in bloodied fatigues, dust clinging to him. Vol approached from the command trailer, expression unreadable. "He's still alive," Jace said without turning. "I was informed. You gave up. I assessed based on available data. You didn't ask for help. You were not listed as medical personnel." Jace turned to face him. "Neither were you, not really." Vol tilted his head. "You risked your life for a low-chance outcome." "Yeah, that's what we do." Serrex's recovery wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy. The field medics stabilized him enough to move him off the front lines, then shipped him to the cruiser vessel Huron orbiting above. Jace requested transfer to the medical ward. Lyra granted it. She didn't say much, but her eyes lingered when she handed over the reassignment pad. "I'm not a nurse," Jace had said. "You're the reason that kid's still breathing," she replied. "Go finish what you started." The Huron wasn't equipped for long-term recovery, but it had enough supplies to keep a man alive. Jace spent the first 3 days monitoring Serrex's vitals, changing Roman 4 bags, cleaning the wound. The shrapnel had torn through the lower liver lobe and perforated the intestine in 4 places. The surgeon aboard used a patch stimulator, but infection was a constant threat. "His fever's back up," Jace muttered on day 4, checking the scanner. 103. Nurse Derry, a quiet woman from the medical team, looked over his shoulder. We'll start another antibiotic cycle. Third one in 2 days. He's not rejecting them, but they're not helping much either. Cultures came back, staff, resistant strain. Jace sat down heavily. Great. Derry touched his shoulder. You've done more than anyone could have expected. He should have died on that drop ship. He didn't. 6 days in, Serrex opened his eyes for the first time. Jace was asleep in the chair beside the bed, boots on the floor, arms folded. The rustle of the sheets stirred him. You're awake. Serrex blinked slowly. Hurts? No kidding. You were impaled. The younger man's gaze was unfocused. Don't remember you were in the drop ship. Took a hit. Lomari medics said you were done for. I'm not. Nope, not yet, Serrex swallowed. You stayed? Yeah. Why? Jace didn't answer right away. He got up and poured a small cup of water from the dispenser. Drink this. Serrex took it with a shaking hand. By the second week, Serrex was able to sit up on his own. The wound was closed but fragile, and his weight had dropped nearly 15 pounds. The fever finally broke after switching to a fourth-line antibiotic the Huron's lab synthesized. Jace helped him walk the corridor outside the med bay, slow steps, one at a time. You ever do this before? Serrex asked, leaning on the wall. Field triage, yeah. Long-term stuff, not really. You're good at it. I read a lot of manuals. Serrex laughed, then winced. Don't make me laugh. Feels like my ribs are still made of glass. They probably are. You cracked too. Took them long enough to notice. Seriously, they ran a scan last night. You didn't tell anyone it hurt to breathe. I thought that was normal. Jace shook his head. You're worse than me. Is that a compliment? No. 3 weeks in, Vol visited the med bay unannounced. Jace was adjusting Serrex's posture in bed when the Lomari stepped inside. I came to observe the vitals, Vol said. Jace didn't look at him. They're on the screen. Vol walked over and studied the monitor. Stabilized. Took a while. Serrex gave a sideways look. You the one who said I was gonna die? Yes. Don't take this the wrong way, but you suck. I based my statement on statistical certainty. Jace crossed his arms. Yeah, well, maybe try hope next time. Vol was silent for a moment. I have not encountered your kind's resilience in this form before. No one's asking you to be impressed. I am not. I am confused. That makes 2 of us, Serrex muttered. By the 5th week, Serrex could walk without support. The medical team cleared him for light activity. Jace finally returned to his own quarters, though most days he still checked in one afternoon. Serrex caught him at the doorway. You could have let me die. I didn't want to. Why? Because someone once didn't let me. Serrex sat back. Guess I owe you. No, you don't, Jace said. Just do the same for someone else one day. Serrex nodded. Deal. The transport shuttle descended with a low groan, touching down on the outer pad of the relay station orbiting the Raleigh's Ridge. The docking bay hissed open just after midday. Jace stepped out, duffel over one shoulder, blinking against the amber light filtering through the station's viewport. He hadn't slept much during the transfer from the Huron, and fatigue clung to him like static. A tall figure waited near the bulkhead, arms folded in a way that only suggested patience if you didn't know her. Lyra was in full gear, helmet clipped to her belt, rank badge dulled by dust. You get taller, Jace asked, dropping his bag beside her. You get slower, she nodded toward the inner corridor. Command wants you cleared for re-entry. Briefings in 20. I'm not here to rejoin your squad. You're not here for the view either. They walked together through the hallway, boots echoing over the polished steel. Lyra tapped her badge against the access panel. The door slid open, revealing a compact debriefing room with 4 chairs and a single screen. Inside, Lieutenant Commander Ayers leaned against the back wall, arms crossed. He didn't look up from the tablet in his hand. I assume you've read the report, Lyra said. I read all the reports, Ayers replied, setting the tablet down. But I still want to hear it from you. About what? About why you pulled a corporal off a deathbed and kept him breathing with nothing but field saline and a heat blanket. Jace leaned back in the chair. Would you rather I hadn't? I'd rather know how you kept him alive without a transfusion kit. I improvised. Ayers raised an eyebrow. With what? 3 liters of lactated ringers, 2 expired glucose bags, and a lot of guesswork. That's not guesswork. That's malpractice. He's alive. That's not the point. Lyra cleared her throat. It is if you're the one bleeding out. Ayers rubbed his forehead. The Lomari filed a formal objection. They want to review human trauma protocols. They're welcome to sit in on the next explosion, Jace said. Preferably one they're not standing next to. The room fell quiet for a moment. Then Ayers tapped the screen and brought up a map of the southern ridge. We've had 5 casualties in 2 days. Heat exposure, oxygen deprivation, 2 cases of renal failure due to sustained dehydration. The outpost's filtration system is down. Engineering says they can fix it, but they need a medic on site. Jace looked at the coordinates. That's a 6-hour hike. You'll be dropped in. I'm not certified for mission medevac anymore. You were never certified for what you pulled off on the Huron either, but here we are. Lyra stood. I'll prep the gear. No, Ayers said. You're staying here. Garner goes alone. Jace blinked. You're sending me into a field op without an escort. We can't spare the personnel. The Lomari refused to assist after the last incident. You're it. An hour later, Jace stood on the open deck of the drop carrier as it crested the edge of the thermal belt. Below, the terrain was scorched and cracked, a maze of jagged ridge lines and sulfur vents. The carrier angled downward and the air inside grew thick with heat. Atmosphere's borderline, the pilot called out over the intercom. You'll need the rebreather from the start. Jace pulled the mask on, adjusted the seal, and checked his bag. 2 Roman 4 packs, a compact filtration unit, burn gel, and his personal kit. No blood plasma, no oxygen tanks, no one to assist. The carrier touched down just below a teetering rock spine. Jace climbed out, boots hitting the ash-coated ground. The outpost was 100 meters ahead, half buried in wind-blown grit. Solar panels angled uselessly into the haze. He knocked twice, then opened the hatch. Inside, the air was stifling. A woman in engineer fatigues looked up from a makeshift bunk. Her skin was flushed, eyes glassy. 2 others sat against the far wall, one unconscious, the other barely alert. I'm Garner. They send the report. We've got no filtration, the woman rasped. Water's gone alkaline and the backup system's jammed. We've been boiling what we can, but it's not enough. They say who went down first, she pointed to the unconscious man. Hess. He stopped urinating yesterday, skins dry as sand. Jace knelt beside Hess and pulled open his eyelids. Pupils sluggish, capillary refill delayed, pulse thready. Help me get him onto the table. The alert engineer helped lift him. Jace unstrapped the pack and pulled out a field scanner. Hess's blood pressure was tanking. Blood urea nitrogen was off the charts. Kidneys were on the verge of collapse. No dialysis out here, just the portable. Broke 2 days ago. Jace hooked up in Roman 4 and started a slow drip of saline mixed with glucose. He pulled out the filtration unit and set it into place beside the bunk. This should filter out some of the toxins. It won't fix the damage, but it'll slow the failure. He turned to the woman. What about him? He gestured to the barely conscious man. Same symptoms. Vomiting, dizzy, hasn't held down water in a day. I'll start another line. Within an hour, both men were hooked up and being monitored. The heat was unrelenting. Jace stripped down to his base layer, sweat soaking through the fabric. He poured a measured amount of distilled water into a sterilized container and passed it to the woman. Small sips every 10 minutes. I'm not the worst off. You're the only one still standing. I need you functional. She nodded, took a sip. By nightfall, the temperature dropped sharply. Jace wrapped Hess in a thermal blanket, adjusted the Roman 4 rate, and laid out his emergency heat packs. The second engineer had begun to respond, eyes clearer, breathing steadier. Jace sat in the corner, back against the wall, watching the monitors. His legs ached from hours crouched over patients. His fingers were raw from handling tubing and seals. The woman stirred a pot on the portable stove. She looked over. You're not a medic, are you? Not officially. Then what are you? He shrugged. Whatever gets the job done. She handed him a cup of warm broth. Guess we're lucky it was you. He didn't answer. The next morning, the filtration system started humming again. The engineer had worked through the night, guided by Jace's makeshift electrolyte tests and a detailed breakdown of pressure differentials he remembered from a training seminar 5 years prior. It wasn't perfect, but the water coming through no longer triggered immediate vomiting. A shuttle arrived a little after midday to extract the 2 worst cases. Jace helped load them onto the stretcher pods, then turned back to the outpost. "You going with them?" the engineer asked. "No, I've got to run blood panels before I leave." "Make sure the system's not cycling toxins." She watched as he unpacked his portable analyzer, fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "I thought you were alone." "I am." "Then why are you doing all this?" He looked up. "Because someone has to." By late afternoon, the system was stable. The water tested clean. Jace packed his gear, left a full report on the console, and stepped back into the heat. As he climbed the ridge toward the extraction point, a Lomari scout drone passed overhead, hovering briefly before darting away. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. The Lomari delegation arrived on the 6th day after Jace's return from the ridge outpost. Not with ceremony, Lomari rarely bothered with that, but with a quiet insistence that matched their reputation. They came in a narrow-bodied diplomatic skimmer that docked without fanfare and released a trio clad in slate armor and dustless robes, gliding through the station's main corridor like they'd been born from the interior plating. Jace had been in the hydroponics bay, checking the nutrient levels on a batch of emergency-grown radish bulbs standard fare for gut flora recovery. He caught sight of the delegation through the transparent bulkhead as they passed by, one of them pausing briefly to glance in his direction before continuing without acknowledgement. By late afternoon, he was called to Conference Room 8, one of the soundproof chambers used for interspecies conflict resolutions and less often for awkward debriefings. There were no windows, just a table, a translator node, and 3 chairs. 2 of them were already occupied. Lyra sat with her arms folded, not in defiance but with a kind of practiced neutrality. Across from her, Ambassador Drellies of the Lomari Confederation adjusted his breathing mask. His gill slits pulsed faintly with the recycled station air. Jace entered, saying nothing, and took the 3rd seat. Drellies didn't look up from the thin slate resting on the table. "You administered unapproved medical intervention on Corporal Serrex without consulting the attending Lomari medic." "You mean Vol," Jace said. "I mean the trained officer appointed for triage during joint operations." He walked away. "I didn't." Drellies looked up then, scleral ridges narrowing. "You challenged authority in a shared command structure." "I challenged inevitability," Lyra piped up. "Are we debating protocol or outcomes?" Drellies ignored her. "The Confederation has reviewed the sensor logs. The corporal's condition was classified as exsanguinating. You lacked transfusion supplies, surgical equipment, and a sterile field. I used what I had. You violated cross-species medical accords." Jace leaned forward. "You're angry I embarrassed your medic." "No," Drellies replied. "We're concerned you've altered the expected risk calculus." Meaning our soldiers may begin to expect miracles rather than orders." Jace stood slowly. "Then maybe your orders need rethinking." Drellies didn't rise. "This is not a punishment. We're here to understand, then ask a question." Drellies paused. "Why try that early, that hopeless?" "Because it wasn't hopeless to me." "No, it wasn't logical to you." "Same thing." Jace left the room before anyone could respond. By the following morning, the Lomari had requested access to the Huron's full medical logs. The request was granted. It took less than a day for them to send back a list of procedural discrepancies, most of which involved improvisations that weren't in any textbook. No one contested the outcomes. But they flagged almost everything as deviation. Jace found Vol in the auxiliary lab staring at a display of human blood cell structures. "Curious?" Jace asked. "Conflicted," Vol replied. Jace stepped closer. The screen displayed a live simulation of red blood cell regeneration under stress conditions, specifically oxygen deprivation. The rate was faster than baseline human data, likely Serrex's sample. You tested his blood. I requested a post-recovery draw. He consented, and his erythrocyte count increased by 39% within 72 hours. That is, improbable, not for someone who's been to basic on Titan. They train with thinner oxygen to stimulate adaptation. Vol turned. You understand your biology is inconsistent. It's adaptable. It's unstable. Same thing, Jace said again. Vol hesitated. We assumed certainty was the highest form of strategy. You assumed everything that can't be measured is failure. The translator buzzed faintly as Vol considered the response. I believed he would die. My actions reflected that belief. Jace didn't correct him. There was no point. 2 days later, Serrex was discharged from orbital rehab and cleared for return to the surface. He met Jace at the hangar stairs with a limp and a grin that didn't stretch too far, thanks to the healing scar down his right side. You look worse than I remember, Jace said. You look like you haven't changed clothes in a week. I haven't. Serrex pulled a duffel over his shoulder. You hear about the Lomari inquiry, I testified. You say anything nice about me? I said you drooled less after day 3. Serrex laughed. You know, I had a dream while I was out. I was back in my dad's garage trying to fix a carburetor with a spoon. And the whole time he just kept saying, well, it's not the right tool, but it's the one you've got. Jace raised an eyebrow. That's disturbingly accurate. They walked together to the lift. The station's gravity was always a little off, just enough to make your legs feel heavier when you stopped paying attention. At the lower level, a crowd had gathered, nothing huge, maybe 20 or 30 personnel, most of them human. A few Lomari stood off to the side, their robes still neat despite the ambient grit. Lyra was at the front. She stepped forward and handed Serrex a small patch. It was matte black with a single gold line across it. What's this? He asked. Unofficial recognition, she said. Means you didn't die when you were supposed to. Appreciate that. She turned to Jace. And for you? She held out a small case. Inside was a folded strip of human medical insignia embroidered with 2 symbols, one for field trauma, the other for unconventional intervention. This isn't standard issue. It is now. Jace took it. You're not a sentimental type. I'm not. But Command's been getting requests from the Lomari for joint training seminars. They want to understand what they're calling adaptive resilience doctrine. I told them you'd teach the first one. Jace blinked. I don't teach, you do now, Serrex grinned. Bet they're gonna love the spoon story. Jace sighed. I hate you both. The crowd dispersed slowly, the way people do when they're not sure if the moment's over or just shifting. The Lomari lingered the longest, not quite making eye contact, but nodding in that way they did when something had changed. Later that evening, Jace sat alone in the galley, nursing a mug of rehydrated coffee that tasted vaguely of rubber tubing. The station was quiet, night cycle lights dimmed. Vol joined him without asking. You were correct, Vol said. About what? Hope is not quantifiable. But it appears to be transmissible. They sat in silence. Somewhere down the corridor, someone was playing old Earth music, the kind with too many brass instruments and lyrics that didn't make sense anymore. It filtered through the vents, broken and warm. Jace finished his coffee and stood. I'll see you at the seminar. I look forward to being confused. You'll fit right in. He left the galley and didn't look back. Nothing needed to be said. No one needed saving, not today.